Hi, I'm Bill Arnold. Thank you for listening to this podcast. There are many more podcasts available at myfaithradio.com. Your support makes this possible. Thank you.
Oh, don't you know, it's the Bill Arnold Show. It's Bill.
And a warm welcome to the Bill Arnold Show. Thanks for joining me today. Many people long for a very, very deep, meaningful connection. In fact, we were kind of built for it, that we would be in loving community. So marriage comes along, and that is not something that's built by chance. Now, it will grow and flourish through humility and grace and a commitment to really know and understand your partner. Now, we're going to talk today with Dr. Kevin Meyer. He's written a book called The Good Marriage, Navigating Conflict, Communication, and Connection. Kevin, so nice to have you here.
It's good to be here. Thanks so much, Phil.
Thanks.
Good to meet you and get a chance to talk together.
Well, my pleasure is mine. And your book comes out September 23rd?
It does.
So we can pre-order it today.
You're sure? Yes, you can.
Yeah. And so you can go on Amazon right now and check it out. It's called The Good Marriage, Navigating Conflict, Communication, and Connection. So anyway, this is your first visit to my show, so I'd love to hear a little bit about let's talk about what makes a good marriage, or why is a good marriage so important?
Well, if we're going to say what makes it, let's get into that. But you said the word important, and I think one of the things that makes it incredibly important is the Bible talks about it, and I don't think a lot of people realize this. I remember when I was doing weddings, more so in years earlier, where I would meet with couples and I would talk to them about just how important marriage is. Because, if you look at the Old Testament in Genesis, you have creation. And then the next chapter, in some ways, is a wedding. God is the Father. He's officiating at this wedding of Adam and Eve. Mm-hmm. And so it kind of begins in that very first few chapters, kind of laying the groundwork of how important this kind of connection, how it foundationally is a part of the development of all society, families, culture, et cetera.
Yeah.
And then you think about it this way too in the New Testament, and if you draw these two together, the first time that God reveals His glory through His Son Jesus is at a wedding.
Wow. Okay.
And so you get this kind of, first miracle. And
yeah.
I think there's something important about marriage.
Yeah. So, Kevin, when you're doing this premarital counseling back then, were they interested in Genesis 2, or did they just have their head in the clouds?
Yeah. Premarital counseling. It's good. Great tools today, far better than what I used to do in that. But yeah, a lot of times couples are just kind of moving forward. But there are some who are very sober and very much wanting to learn and understand
Beautiful.
How they can be better connected.
Yeah. Do you have memories of when you saw a counselor first time?
Oh man, I'm sure you'd bring that up.
Well, you keep talking about the counselors of past days.
Right.
Yeah, you must have attended one.
Yes, we did marital counseling when I was at seminary, and my wife and I sat down with a guy, and he was, and I kind of thought like, this marriage thing, it shouldn't be too hard, I'm a sensitive, kind of loving, caring guy, and so you know where this is heading.
Oh, this is not good.
Yeah, so then I have the opportunity to meet with them. We've done some tests, and he looks at my wife, and he says to her, Grace, first he said to me, he said, Kevin, you have an incredible person here in Grace, and she is got these qualities and characteristics. And I was kind of going, okay, that's good. And then turns and he says, and Grace.
Good luck.
Yeah, honestly, basically, this is going to take some work. so I always tell her, you were forewarned.
Wow. And now today you've written a book called The Good Marriage. So
yeah.
Way to go, Kevin.
Yeah. Well, that's hopefully it is something that is really helpful.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about the goal of marriage. I love the fact that it's biblically based, of course, between a man and a woman in a covenantal relationship, but also I'm curious about what your take is on people's expectations, and because expectations, if they're not met, that can be very,
very, very difficult.
tragic. Yeah.
I don't think a lot of people think about the goal of marriage. I think we have a lot of good teaching around like the purpose of marriage to bring glory to God. But I to tell about the goal of marriage and what that relationship is like, I'm going to have to tell a bad story about myself once again. So this is what kind of led me into really digging into marriage and understanding our relationship and things such as that. We had been married, my wife and I, probably about 7 years. I was about 32 years of age, and we had 2 kids, 2 and 4 years of age. And my church at that time, as a lead pastor, I was a solo pastor, and I don't think people understand how difficult it is to be the only pastor of a church that's growing. And so we had just hired someone part-time, and as we were into that ministry, I didn't catch some changes that were occurring, which were pretty obvious.
At home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Having 2 kids.
Oh, well, okay. I'm cutting you lots of slack here, Kevin.
And so here I am working all this time into the church and helping as best I can people to grow and know Christ. And then my wife is an interior designer, so she has work that she's doing. She also works about 15 hours plus in a worship capacity in our church. And then we had 2 kids. And what a lot of times people don't realize is one of the primary predictors of conflict is life change. And you just think of a few. Maybe you can think of some major life changes, like loss.
Yeah.
It could be a new job, career.
Mm-hmm.
It could be you move into a new place. It's things like illness. It can be one of those things. But one of the most significant predictors of conflict is, what would you guess? A baby. Having a baby. People don't realize it. And you come into this situation and life changes. And a lot of times, I don't think sometimes guys even realize how much it brings change. Marriage expert John Gottman writes, the arrival of a baby is supposed to be a joyous event, but our research on newlyweds found that 3 years after a baby was born, a staggering 67% of couples had experienced a plummeting in overall happiness and a spike in hostility toward each other.
Wow. That is a huge number.
Isn't that a huge number?
Yeah, that's a really big number.
And so anyone who's listening who has young kids and hasn't taken into account the incredible change, and when you think about that, what he's basically saying is expect fight, anticipate conflict. That's probably going to happen. And in our case, life change occurred, and I continued working hard, and my wife is one of the most positive people I know. She hit a really dark time. And then at that same time, thankfully, her mother-in-law had talked with her and could just sense it, had her come to Thief River Falls, go back home for about a week. She came back, my wife did, and in the process of having a fight, I can still see the room in the basement, she kind of said to me, there are times that you encourage people to separate for a period of time. She said, I think we need to separate. And that got my attention.
Oh, boy.
And so when you say, how did this book come about? It started with seeds quite a long time ago.
Yeah.
So
I'm still cutting you a lot of grace. I mean, this if 63% find their lives turned upside down with a kid, and you're solo pastor of a church, so you're preaching, you're teaching, you're marrying, you're burying, and you're trying to solve.
You're trying to run a kids program.
You're trying to do everything.
Yes.
Right, and you've got 2 young kids at home. This is overwhelming, Kevin.
Yeah, it was overwhelming. So thank you for cutting me the slack.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it was, for me, one of those wake-up moments. And I thought, I'm going to go see a counselor. So I'm sitting in this counselor's office, and I'm hoping no one notices me or sees me, especially from my church or community. Because, I've been on Sunday mornings taking the Bible and trying to help people understand what it means to live your life and have your act somewhat together. I didn't want anyone to see me there thinking, well, he doesn't have his act together. And so I go into the counselor, and he first that question he asked me, he said, we have 50 minutes, what would you like to accomplish? And I'm kind of thinking, I mean, that's your job, and then it just, a question popped into my mind. And it was, why do I have so much more energy for my church and in the work I do than I do for my wife and my kids? And that was kind of the lifelong kind of, let's figure this out.
That's a pretty significant question.
Yeah.
Did you find? What did you discover? What was uncovered in that counseling meeting?
Wow.
Because you can control church. You're in charge.
You
right?
You really can't control relationships. People try, and it doesn't really cause a relation to go well. So yeah, the church, you can put programs and things together, but when it comes to kind of the other part of it isn't not even so much what I can control. The other part of it for me was where I was getting kind of that attaboy approval and all that kind of stuff. And I think that's true for a lot of people. I think especially lead pastors, there's something about doing things and you feel good about it. And so that motivates you. You don't get that when you come home in the same way.
Yeah. Are you a pleaser?
No, I'm really not.
Interesting.
No, I'm not. That's not my first thing. But it is. If you want to go to Enneagrams or something like that, I am a 3, which is one who, a shame, it kind of controls you. In part of what a 3 longs for is to be valued by what they do. And so more successful you are, the better you feel about yourself, which is just a black hole.
Yeah, it is.
It isn't going to, be filled by anybody but Jesus, who really fills that.
Kevin, I'd love for you to say more about that. That just hit a nerve.
What do you mean? In the sense of,
the
sense,
give
me your question.
The sense of the more affirmation I get, the better I feel about myself.
Yeah.
Because I have a seat at the table in heaven.
Yeah.
I mean, come on. So,
well, it's really an interesting thing. In Luke, you look at chapter 10, and Jesus sends out the 72, and they come back, and they go, "Oh, we're so excited! Even the demons submit to us in your name." Right? They're really thrilled, and it's really interesting because in that passage of Luke, it's the only time that it says that Jesus was full of joy, but through the Holy Spirit. But before he begins to praise God for the fact that he reveals these things to kind of little children, naive people, foolish enough to believe, he looks at those 72 and he goes, guys, don't get such a thrill in a sense of value from what you've just done and the work you do. It's almost like don't get it from your ministry, your work. I don't care what it is. Get it because your names are written in the book of life, which means it's more about your being, who you are, and your identity, whose you are.
Right. I like that.
Than it is about what you do.
Dr. Kevin Meyer is my guest. His book is The Good Marriage. It comes out the 23rd of this month. Beautiful foreword by John and Nancy Ortberg. You and John Ortberg were college roommates, weren't you?
Yeah, we were.
That's crazy.
Yeah, we were. We struck our relationship up there, and we've just stayed in contact. And actually, every year I get together with 5 of our college roommates, and we spend a long weekend together.
Beautiful.
And it's been an incredible community.
Yeah. I watched that video of you and John, and I've always said there's nothing inconsequential in God's economy.
Yeah.
So, you are looking for a place to stay, and John says, yeah, you can room with us.
Oh, he was looking for a place.
He was looking for a place. That's right.
And I had a roommate, and I was pretty excited about it, of where I was going. He said at Wheaton College, I was going to be in this dorm called McManus, and I was excited. And then he asked me, and I was, and at that point, I'll just leave it there. At that point, I wasn't really excited about John coming, but I did. I actually prayed about it at that point, and I thought, okay, this is probably the right thing to do. And amazing, even though we weren't as close in that beginning part, he's become one of my best friends.
Yeah. But that's at one of those moments.
Yeah.
That was not inconsequential, because look at where you are today.
Right.
So let's always pay attention to those little moments and say, this could be a God-ordained moment.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And someone listening right now, I might be hearing this in their marriage, and this might be one of those divine appointments where God is saying, I really want you to do something in your marriage.
Yeah. Now, you say that connection is a moving target.
Yes.
So we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to learn more about what that means.
Yep.
Dr. Kevin Meyer is my guest. The book is called The Good Marriage, Navigating Conflict, Communication, and Connection. If you have a question or hear something you want to hear, have Kevin elaborate on, you are so welcome to text your question or comment in 877-933-2484. Be right back. It is my deepest desire that you take the very first step of faith by placing your faith and trust in Jesus Christ. If you've got questions about what it means to begin a relationship with Jesus, text the word faith to 41224. I'm back with Dr. Kevin Meyer. He's written a new book called The Good Marriage. Navigating Conflict, Communication, and Connection comes out 9/23/25.
Yep.
Right?
Yep, that's it.
You can
It'll be
pre-order it
released
today.
then. Yeah.
All right, I have people asking about the name of the book. There it is, The Good Marriage. All right, you talk about connection as a moving target. What do you mean by that, Kevin Meyer?
Well, I was just telling you that I believe the goal of a relationship and marriage is connection. In fact, any relationship, it's about connection. Think about I am the vine, you are the branch.
Yeah.
Think of the Trinity, et cetera. But when you get to this idea of being a moving target, I kind of would often say that the goal is connection. The glue in that connection is commitment. And the reason I say that is because connection is a moving target. It really is. Life happens. It's dynamic. Things keep changing. And we kind of have this idea once we start getting we're getting connected, boy, that's just something that we don't have to pay as much attention to. And then because of a baby comes along, right? Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, your connection is under stress or changes, and it forms. It actually reveals things in your relationship that you didn't see before, and there's all those kind of things as you go along in life. I'll just use another major one. Kids leave, and you send them to college. And they're gone, and now you're empty nested. And a lot of people, because they don't deal with conflict, they don't learn how to have communication. Because we're in the curriculum. Did you ever have learning how to have good conversation through conflict? You just don't have that. I don't think people teach you that. We expect people to learn to do that, and most people really catch what has been modeled. It's that taught thing. But in this sense of the dynamicness of life, because I kind of say the glue of connection is commitment, because there is this changing, and so the kids leave, and now you're looking at your spouse and what's happened is you haven't maybe dealt with the connection and the growing in your connection, and you've lived side-by-side lives because we're really good at, the goal being maybe raising the kids or getting ourselves set for, retirement. We do this as a team, and you get there and all of a sudden you go, man, I'm feeling alone. I'm feeling like we don't really even know each other. We don't go to the games and watch our kids in sports or whatever it might be. And so the glue, I would say, of connection is commitment. It's really important because of the changes that take place in a person's life. Here I am, I'm in my 60s, and I've come to this place where you would think I've written a book, The Good Marriage, but then this summer I had a couple surgeries and some other things going on, and it was just really a difficult time. It was also a very stressful time in our connection, and I remember at times thinking I should have just named this the so-so marriage or something like that, because, it didn't feel like the good marriage, mm-hmm. and even more so, I think, my wife. And I named it The Good Marriage because it's not about being perfect. It is not about having the best marriage. When we went through that stuff and we began to work through our relationship in times through counseling and other things such as that, the Word of God, and being in a small group, it was so important for us. We really got real with other people in community about our lives and our marriage. You go through all those different changes and things. What creates the glue is this sense that I have made a commitment, and a vow is a covenant. And covenants are promises, right? And promises are not to be broken. Right? Mm-hmm. It's not a contract. And so, like in all other relationships, you can kind of go, I'm ready to, this is too much, or you need to deal with it. But in this one, you have to learn to really stick together. And connection is a moving target. So when I'm here in my 60s and my wife and I are, and we've gone through some difficult times, you'd think we'd have it all sewn up. But things like we start, getting hard of hearing. People do in this age. And that creates a stress because you thought the person heard you, and mm-hmm. And in the past, my wife would have thought for sure I heard it, and I probably did, but now I really don't. You know what I mean? Because I can't hear.
Yeah.
So connection keeps moving.
Sure, it does.
Yeah.
So, no, 5 minutes ago or so, you mentioned John Gottman, and I did read one of Gottman's books, and I found it fascinating when he said, even in the best relationships, you're in sync about 35% of the time. And I thought that was an unbelievably hard statistic, because I would think that really good, happy married people would be in sync 90% of the time.
No, not at all. And that should give us a sense of grace and mercy, even in the eyes of God. He knows we're human, and just think how often we're in sync with Him.
Yeah.
Right? And now you have two humans trying to be in sync.
Right.
And you come from different backgrounds with different wounds and different reactive patterns. And
yeah. He said the best potential relationship would be a mother with her nursing child. And they're in sync about 35% of the time.
Yeah. It's pretty amazing.
It is pretty amazing.
Yeah, because that's that kind of dependency, and yet, again, that child is a different being with different experiences and different understandings. And, children, especially babies, what makes it so difficult is you just don't know what they're saying. I always kept thinking, I can't wait that they can tell me what they want. but here's what's interesting. Come back to marriage. Mm-hmm. A guy named Danny Silk talks about this trust cycle, and I talk about this in my book as well. What happens when we're younger as babies is we learn to trust, like when you cry or you mess your pants, whatever, and they come and they change it, or they help you and they're trying to figure out what the need is and they meet it, and it builds trust. And in marriage, that's what you're also seeking to do. When a person has a need, there's that opportunity to meet that need and to build trust. And in a lot of marriages, because we come with different wounds and different hurts and different things going on with regard to, the way our personality temperament is, the way that we, you think of love languages, the way we feel loved, we're also different.
Yeah, good point.
And so you think 35%, I'm thinking that's high for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Not my good friend, but my friend, Dr. Larry Crabb, said something that was very good. And he said, when you talk about being in a marriage and being in love, he said, one night I was laying in bed with my wife. We were 5 inches apart physically and 5 miles apart emotionally.
Yeah.
And she said, do you think we're going to make it?
Yeah.
And he said, I don't know.
Yeah.
And he said, I just got done writing a book on how to have a good marriage.
Yeah, it was so funny. Larry Crabb was one of my heroes. I read a lot of his stuff because I think his stuff is really good. In fact, he had a huge impact in my understanding of going inside and understanding
phenomenal.
What I needed to do with Jesus to build my inner life.
Yeah. So he said, my wife and I went through 13 months of very, very stressful time and counseling, and we got on the other side of that. And 13 months later, we looked at each other and we said, wow, we really are in love.
Yeah.
And I thought, what a beautiful moment that was.
Yeah, I think that is, again, it just goes back to the glue being commitment.
Yeah.
And if you stay committed and you go and, get the resources that are necessary, if you're humble, there's a great opportunity for change.
Mm-hmm. And the stages of life that you've talked about, that makes connection a moving target.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was Pastor Lewis Smeeds.
Mm-hmm.
Am I saying his name right?
Yep.
Yeah. He said, my wife's been married to 5 different men, all of them me.
That's so true.
And that's kind of the stages of life, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It
Yeah.
is. We just keep continually changing.
Yeah. Dr. Kevin Meyer is my guest. His book is called The Good Marriage, Navigating Conflict, Communication, and Connection. We're going to take a little break, and we'll be right back. If you have a question or comment, 877-933-2484. So if you have maybe incompatible goals or different needs or different perspectives, you might have what's called a conflict.
Yep.
And that will result in a disagreement or a struggle. And we're talking today to Dr. Kevin Meyer. His book is called The Good Marriage, Navigating Conflict, Communication, and Connection. Let's pick that first word, Kevin, in your subtitle, conflict. And let's talk about that.
Sure. I subtitle it The Gift of Conflict because often all we think about is being negative. And it can be, and often is very negative for people. And you just kind of want to avoid it. And there's conflict avoiders, et cetera. But it is also a gift. it has the ability to produce in us a character. It has the ability to help us understand the other person in a way that we hadn't before. I think of the Bible, it says, consider pure joy when you face various kinds of trials, which you think about it, I am kind of right. You'd read that and then you go, that's a really important statement. J.B. Phillips puts it this way. He says, when all kinds of trials and temptations crowd into your life, my friends, don't resent them as intruders, but welcome them as friends. And there is that sense that with conflict in a marriage, you can change perspective a bit and say, okay, I want to welcome this as a friend. What can I understand? What can God teach me about this? What can I know? And for instance, anger. Anger, if you're angry at me, okay, I would kind of want to know, first of all, I wouldn't like it, right? And secondly, I'm not sure that would be the best posture for one another, but anger tells you that you're really committed to something. Think about it. Something you
love is being threatened.
Something's being threatened, or there's a wound that you're seeking to protect. There's something going on behind that anger. And a lot of times, just in our culture alone, anger is something that people just see as negative. But in reality, anger is just energy. It's either used constructively or destructively, and most oftenly destructive. Yeah. Right? So in a relationship, as you come into conflict, the gift of that, if you can kind of pull down the amps of all the emotion and energy, if you can pray about it and think about it, is you can kind of yourself ask, what am I so committed to here? Or you can be praying, what is it that my spouse is so committed to? It can give you some insight into who they are and what does it mean? What is the need that might be under this? And I'm not talking about like needs like, I need you to, pick up the coffee cups you leave all around the house kind of thing. I'm talking about needs that are deeper. What I talk about in the book, they're kind of these universal needs like I need partnership. That's a different thing. And I have found in dealing with couples that we usually have a number of conflicts we go back to again and again. And I think anybody who's listening to who's married will kind of tell you, there are certain conflicts we just have over and over again. And some of them are based on your personality types, and that's why it's good to get to know that, talk about that in the book. But the other part of it is it's also good to get to know what those conflicts are, because underneath them are some deeper needs. And so in the book, and this was probably one of the most profound things that helped me. There was a lady that my wife and I, a therapist who, her name was Pia Melody, who actually taught us a way to communicate and to dial things down in such a way that we could begin to take a specific conflict, untie that knot, and begin to develop skills and steps to really communicate around that. And eventually it helped in so many other areas. We didn't have to untie all the knots that were there, but we began to understand why those knots even were created in the first place. So that was, for us, super helpful. So we will, with couples, often work with them on that, and we'll have them sit facing each other, and we'll have them have a conflict issue that they have, and they will go through these steps and do this with one another. And it's amazing how often at a certain point I've seen guys just in tears.
Oh, wow.
It's pretty powerful.
Mm-hmm. I sometimes, Kevin, see anger as frustration just boiling over.
Yeah. Well, what is frustration?
Well, it's something that's not resolved, right? Or it's a hurt that's below that's causing frustration. And if that gets pushed at some point, it'll boil over, and then I'll be angry. Yeah.
Or another way, frustration could be looked at as something that you maybe want is being blocked.
Sure.
Right?
Say more about that.
Yeah. So, well, I mean, you might become frustrated. I was frustrated, really frustrated coming to the show this afternoon.
Why?
Because I'm going along 94, and I'm going to go through the tunnel, and in front of me, all of a sudden, there's a sign up that says there's an accident, crash in the tunnel, and I couldn't get out of that. And I kept trying to get, and so then I got into another place, and thank God for these little things on our phones that show us where to go. Mm-hmm. I just followed that, and still, it red lines all I'm going. So that was frustrating. What I wanted to do was to be here a lot earlier than I was.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm frustrated and I'm angry. I remember one person in front of me was going slow, and I was just going, come on, you know.
Yeah.
That's part of it. So we have that in our marriage. Something's being blocked.
Mm-hmm.
And so then in marriages, again, if I can just change you, and how well does that work, right?
Not very good.
Right. No. Only person you can change is yourself. And I did a message one time called the myths of marriage, and one of them is this idea that it takes two people to have a good marriage. That's not true. Sometimes it only takes one. And that means there's one person who in this dance is going, I'm tired of you elbowing me and tired of getting stepped in the foot. Let's stop this dance and figure out what's going on. And even if the other person may not want to, you yourself can begin to understand it. And I can promise you, when let's you go in and get some counseling and you get some understanding around this dance, and you kind of say, I want to dance in a different way, it's going to either cause that person to want to learn a new dance. And in some occasions, I've seen where a person goes, I don't want to dance with you anymore. But you can. God, through you, can give you wisdom and insight and understanding where you can begin to change yourself. And as you begin to change yourself, as your character begins to change, it has an impact on everything around you, including your spouse.
Let's talk about the roles then in a marriage, Kevin, because perhaps the wife is saying, I wish my husband would take charge of this situation and instigate change.
Yeah, that is a great question. That would have to kind of almost dissect it and going, what is it that they want? Because again, I want you to take charge of it. It all depends what you're talking about. If it means you need to take charge of something because someone's life is being hindered, well, you got to really do something about it. But if you want them to take charge of something and they don't, and maybe their personality style is not one to be that's going to be a frustration. And then it is kind of a sense of, how do I learn to live with this? Some people will say that, especially, I think there'll be some wives going to want I would love for my husband to take charge of our spiritual life.
I hear that often here at the show.
Yeah.
They would love for leadership to happen in that department.
And I have this sense of that, so I kind of position myself here. I do believe in marriages that we come together equally, and I'm not a big buyer in the sense of we have this role where the man is to kind of be the one that tells what to do. Yeah, here's what I think is important with regard to leadership. I would say to men, your responsibility isn't to be the one who rules over your wife. Your responsibility is to be the first one to bend your knee before Jesus.
Beautiful.
And that's called spiritual initiative. And when you bend your knee before Jesus and your partner bends their knee before Jesus, now you're not being ruled by one another's mind. You're being ruled by the mind of Christ. If you're humble and really willing to do this, and this takes time and practice and character change and things, but that's what I would encourage husbands to think about, the fact that I should be taking spiritual initiative. And it doesn't mean that the wife doesn't take spiritual initiative in her own way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes a ton of sense. So, Kevin, you say that connection is a moving target, and I understand that to be true. But do people have a limited understanding of the ways that they can connect?
That's a great question, because I also will say connection is multifaceted.
Okay. What does that mean?
And by that, I mean that there are things you can do to increase your understanding, to deepen connection. There are different ways to connect. So let me just put it this way, and I'll get pretty real on this, and that is, and I'm going to be making this is going to be a little more generalized. Let's say for men learn intimacy often in sports, competitive. They're together. They're going to, like the Vikings are going to beat, how close they are at the end of that. Or you're going to, in the military, or you can, in the corporate world, let's just say some of those places where you're heading for a goal. And that's really something that men do. But what they don't realize that also men, one of the ways that they most feel intimate with their wife is through sex and physical intimacy, right? And that's limiting. There are other ways to be connected to that person that you're living with, and that's an important one. But I want to make it clear that I think if it's just that, and I'll just say to the guys, if if it's just that, you need to learn also other ways. And ways to do that is beginning to move into your marriage and enrich it by doing things like, and I have some chapters on this idea of learning and understanding the reactivity, the wounds that create problems. Talking about what is the personality types. Some of the people don't believe in those kind of testings. I think they can be helpful in understanding how you're wired. There's other ones, such as, this book, which you hear all the time, The Love Language. There is something to that in the sense that people feel loved in the way that they feel loved, right? And so if you can kind of understand that, that's helpful. So my wife is, her love language, one of them is gifts. And I used to think that meant like I got to get diamonds and things like that. And I don't have the means to do that. But I did. Begin as we were working through this. Gift means just knowing your partner. So it can be buying her some napkins or something like that. That is something she enjoys. I found in beginning to understand what it means to love that person in that language, it has a way of decreasing stress and allows for them to feel loved. And that's another way that builds connection. Mm-hmm. It's so really getting to know these different areas of how you can be connected more than just in one way, especially I would say with guys.
Mm-hmm. Interesting point. And then you can ask your partner, to fill in the blank. I feel loved when.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel loved when you spend quality time with me.
Or I feel loved when you show up with pretty napkins. That I never expected.
Well, and again, tell a bad story to myself. We were married probably about 9 years or so, and I got her birthday presents, and I was getting her gifts, and I got her like a rice cooker and some other kitchen utensils, and it was not a great birthday because at one point she looked at me and goes, Kevin, I don't even really like to do much cooking in the kitchen, and I think you already know I don't even eat rice, so I had to pay attention. It wasn't any gift. It was the gift that she felt loved by.
Right.
Was really.
Should have gotten her the power sander.
That would have been the deal. That would have been something that a gift certificate at like some hardware store.
I mean, you could have shown up with, a dozen roses and a cashmere sweater, and she could have gone, "Where's the card?"
Well,
because all she wanted was the little card that says you're special.
That's how we miss
and
each other.
And you're going, what? The flowers and the cashmere.
Totally.
Yeah.
That's how we miss each other.
Yeah.
So, and that's that whole idea of what it means to truly be connected.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's just kind of go through the book quickly because it doesn't come out until the 23rd, but I do want to cover some bases for my listeners, and let's talk about what the potential of a good connection is.
We're looking here at the potential, and that's where in the book I tell a bit of our story and about how we learn to do some of the stuff I was telling you about with regard to how we communicate in times of conflict and some of that. And,
yes.
And the potential there is that God, if you read through the Word of God, it's pretty clear we're made to connect. And there's all kinds of potential through gifts of conflict, which I talked about. One of the things I talk about in there is the legacy that you could leave. And a lot of people, obviously we talk about how do you save for retirement and pass on a financial inheritance. I had the opportunity to do a funeral for a guy. His name was Clint. He was 99 years of age. He and his wife had been married 70 years.
Wow.
And in that congregation, as I did that funeral, there were kids and grandkids and great-grandkids and great-grandkids, and you couldn't believe the stories they talked about with regard to their grandparents, et cetera, connection. And just a few years ago, I had the opportunity to do the funeral for his wife, and she died at 103. And I go, what a legacy they left behind. They left. He was a farmer. He left a lot of farm implements and other things. But one thing that he left that has impacted every one of them was a good marriage.
Wow. And they walked the walk, didn't they?
Yeah, and that's the potential of a good connection. So when you look at that, that's that kind of first part of it I talk about in that book, and that second part is just the idea of getting to know you and your partner. I don't know how well we really know one another, and that's some of the stuff we've already talked about. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what you're doing speaks so loudly, I can't hear what you're saying. All you do is just sit back and watch how Grandma and Grandpa are conducting their lives.
Yeah.
And it's spectacular.
Yeah.
You think you got to teach all these lessons, but maybe the lesson is just showing your kids and grandkids how much you love your mother or
well,
grandma.
you know what they found too, and I found this in studies too, that we always say, our kids, we're going to love them, and that's the most important thing. No, the most important thing is your love towards one another as a couple, because it's in that they feel the greatest security.
No, that's awesome. All right, we're going to take a little break. Dr. Kevin Meyer is my guest. His book is called The Good Marriage, Navigating Conflict, Communication, and Connection. We'll be right back.
Have you heard the news? Listening just got better with the new and improved Faith Radio app. No more restrictions, no more static, no more missing your favorite shows. Now, listen when you want, where you want, and share with everyone. When you need hope, encouragement, Jesus, it's right there on your phone. Text the word app to 877-933-2484 and follow the link or search Faith Radio Network in your app store.
Dr. Kevin Meyer is my guest. His book is called The Good Marriage, comes out on September 23rd, Navigating Conflict, Communication, and Connection.
Yep.
All right, we've talked the importance of connection. Let's talk about some of the skills of communication.
Yeah.
I think we all need to brush up on
Well,
that.
no, I'm going to do something because as I share this, you're really slowing down a conflict. I had said that most people, tie these conflicts and there becomes a knot, and often there's some of the same ones. And so when we will have a couple do that, we will ask them to kind of fill out a sheet and talk about their conflict. And what so often happens is in a marriage conflict is, and Gottman has some actual statistics on this, on how quickly you go from 0 to 60 in emotional energy and anger and frustration and everything. And before you know it, you're in a fight. And often what happens when you're talking about a specific, let's say a specific conflict issue, instead of just giving the data, it's one of the things we encourage them to do as they put together these sheets, is just write down the facts, as if like you had a video of this, the progressive commercials, or you see the video. But it's not about winning or losing in that one. It's more just get the facts down. And my wife is really good at this because she'll spend a couple days thinking about how can I say this so that it's just, here's the data, and if I share this with you, you're going to go, yeah, that happened, right? What so often we do is we don't just share the data, we put all kinds of judgment and emotional language in it. So, for instance, you could say, here's an example, I'll just kind of give you this one. Yesterday morning, you said you would pick up some cream after your evening meetings, and I emphasized to you how important it was. Due to my busy day, I won't be able to pick it up. I needed it this morning to make brownies for the group meeting we'll be attending tonight. And when I looked in the refrigerator this morning, there was no cream. Now, that's a factual one. I could go, yeah, you're right? The data's correct. A lot of times what people will do is say, yesterday morning you said you'd pick up the cream after your evening meetings because you don't listen and can be forgetful. I made sure to emphasize how important getting the cream was last night. And when I opened the refrigerator this morning, I was so angry. You obviously don't care about me. My entire day has been rearranged. That kind of thing. Mm-hmm. That's kind of what happens. And so what we try and do is we take one specific conflict issue and we say, have a speaker presents that data. Here's what happened. The listener goes, yes. And then the speaker moves to the next thing, which is really important. So you move from objectivity, which is a skill to do this, to what I call is just subjectivity. And it's where you kind of go, my mind made up this, or Brene Brown will say, the story I told myself. You move to your interpretation, what happened, what that meant. So, you didn't pick that up. And what I, in my mind, thought about that was that you don't care about me. You don't have time for me. Just listen to those things. And that person is to listen and just takes that in without responding. And it's really hard to do that because one of the other skills is empathy. You know, that whole idea of, you know, it's not sympathy where you're kind of saying, oh, I feel so bad about you. It's actually like if a person falls in a hole, it's not standing up there and going, I feel bad about you. It's about getting in the hole and just being next to him. So I just kind of say, you're in a hole, you're next to him right now, right, in this. And then they move from that subjective kind of my meaning of it to what is the next phase is where they share their feelings. And we're, as a culture, really poor at understanding feelings. I mean, Brene Brown says that they did this research, and they found that most people can only name three: sad, mad, and glad. Those are the kind of primary emotions. They don't have a very extensive vocabulary. And a lot of times, too, we don't even express a feeling. She says, you know, my wife could say, you know, I felt like you don't care, you know, you don't, and what I thought about this is that you don't care about me. And how I felt was sad, you know, and you actually list what were the emotions you felt. Most people don't do that. They go, I felt like you don't care. And they move right back into judgment statements. They use the word felt with the word like next. And any time you do that, that's a judgment. I'm going through this so quickly, it's much more extensive in the book. But as you go to the next one, then after you share those feelings, usually when those are shared, the other person is going, man, I didn't know that's what you were thinking. That's not what I meant by that. And and they're touched by their emotions. They're not defensive now. And that's what often happens to a fight. So then you learn to do that. And then that person says, and here was my need. I need you to be reliable. I need you to be a participant, you know, whatever those things would be. And then the fifth thing you do is you kind of work through, okay, how can we together come up a way to make sure that we meet these needs. And as couples begin to do that, and they slow it all down, and they begin to really communicate, it makes a difference in how they begin to start relate to one another. You begin to understand, oh, that's where their mind goes. I don't want that in our marriage. So those are some of the things when you ask about this whole idea of what are some of those skills. I think there are skills that it's really almost kind of, and when couples do it, it feels like, you know, it's like learning to throw, or like when you're playing tennis. I had my buddy John Ortberg, he was also an All-American tennis player, and he was teaching me how to serve, and my serve was all wrong. And to redo it, I had to relearn it, and it took a slow movement, not a fast one. Right. You know what I mean? So that's what happens in these settings.
Yeah. Whenever you're being taught a lesson, they're deconstructing what you once did.
Totally.
And it's so painful. It's like, was I that bad? I mean, you know, take a golf lesson and you realize, is my swing that awful?
Yeah. And, you know, Bill, that's a really good point. I think that's what's so difficult. And that's why when I say, you know, if the glue is commitment, if you want to talk the growth of a relationship is effort, you got to put time and effort in.
And I like that comment, Kevin, where you said, I feel like. So if those words feel and like are side by side, a judgment is on its way. And
yes.
I think the response would naturally be defensive.
Totally. Or someone says, I felt abandoned. I mean, you go, well, is that a feeling? Well, when you feel abandoned, you're going to get defensive. Like, I didn't abandon you. But if you said, I felt lonely,
that's different.
That hits in your
heart. Because I only think kids can be abandoned. You can't abandon an adult.
Well, there you go.
I don't know. Can you?
But it happens. I bet you people who are listening have probably said that statement many times. And when you say that statement, and you may have felt that way, but when you use those words, it puts up a wall. Versus when you actually use a feeling, I felt lonely and sad.
That's effective, isn't it?
Yeah.
But what if there's 20 years of resentment and now you're starting a new technique?
Well, the resentment needs forgiveness.
Okay,
and
good.
I talk about that as well. Forgiveness is one of the most, there's two things that I think are really critical. One is knowing who you are, your identity, and we don't have time to go into all that. And the other is forgiveness.
Mm-hmm. Very, very well done, Kevin Meyer. Thank you so much for coming in and fighting traffic and getting getting in here to talk about your book.
Oh,
it comes
Bill,
out
thanks.
September 23rd. The book is called The Good Marriage, Navigating Conflict, Communication, and Connection. Kevin D. Meyer, Meyer, is the author and has been my guest. That's all the show we have for today. I want to thank Beverly Canaris for Hour 1 and Dr. Kevin Meyer. for this hour. If you missed any of today's show, you're always welcome to head over to the podcast at myfaithradio.com. However you slice it, I have loved being with you today, and I've so enjoyed this time, and it means a whole lot that we're going to have this time together for as much as you can spend in today's show. I appreciate it, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Have a good night. Thanks for listening. Programming like this is made available through your support. Information available at myfaithradio.com.
Jordan was just 21 when she found herself in an unplanned pregnancy.
I was scared, alone, and didn't know what to do.
And hear how a tweet from the world's richest man inspired a pro-life diaper company's ambitious campaign.
We blew up a huge billboard in Times Square, and it said, "Make more babies."
They're all true stories that'll make you say,
"Wow, God.
Wow, God.
Wow, God."
Wow, God stories, wherever you get your podcasts and at myfaithpodcasts.com.